And welcome back to a 2024 presidential election prediction. This time explaining to you why we're looking towards a landslide and what a landslide would look like in a 2024 demographic setting. So, first and foremost, while Donald Trump most certainly has a lead in this election, a lot of people might think that it is possible for this map to happen. I'm telling you right now, it will not 110%. Joe Biden could literally be having a heart attack on the day of the election itself. Everybody reads that notification as if it were an Amber Alert, and yet they would still vote Democrat regardless. And so, for this to really happen is not really theoretically even possible. That being said, let's compare this to the past. We look at landslides in 1984, for example, when the world was completely different. The blood of the country was different. It was blood red at the time, but I mean, the people voting, it was a different group. And the cohort, the boomers that were young 40 years ago, are really becoming a fraction of the population as to what they were before. And so it really becomes an issue of, while, yeah, of course, Reagan did win in 1984 by a metric load ton, you have to really consider that the people voting are just really distinct from what it is now. And I think things are more polarized. As you can see here, you'll notice that Ronald Reagan was up by about 18 percentage points over Walter Mondale, okay? Despite the fact that Donald Trump is going against somebody with some, presumptively, and I think this is not crazy to say, but a level of dementia we haven't seen before. Truth is that still Joe Biden's still going to get more than 40.6% of the vote, unlike Mondale. And so that's a brutal thing to watch. Now, again, like I said, when you do the aggregate for all the Trump battleground states like Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Nevada, you'll notice that Trump is in the lead by about 3.2% on the average everywhere. Now, that being said, some states are different from others in regards to the percentages, which is important, but also it's notable that this is a landslide insofar as odds of winning, because again, it's not by how much you win, but winning at all. In fact, when we look at somebody like George W. Bush, we know that the guy barely won at all, okay? Now, he still won, and so we got all the glory. Now, when we look at it one way, we do have a couple of new factors that we're implementing into the video. So as I was saying, we do have some more vectors that we can actually analyze this sort of video format through. And so this is why I'm making the video today. As you can see, I found this niche website, which is great, okay? Now, what you'll notice is that there are certain percentage totals that kind of are discongruent with what we see today. And so we saw in 2016 and in 2020 an election in which oversampled Democrats in their polling and had Donald Trump come in from behind, in the case of Hillary actually supplanting her lead in 2016. And in the Biden case, we saw what happened, but technically Biden won narrowly. But the point being is that the polls in both cases underestimated Trump, and just overall seems like maybe that could be the case today. Now, granted, Donald Trump is winning the popular vote by about 0.3 percentage points. You can see right here. The thing is, of course, is that some things are bound to change. The conviction in and of itself, I think, helps Donald Trump. While most people are kind of okay with the results / are apathetic, because not only is Donald Trump probably guilty of whatever they're saying he is, those 34 counts, but it's also like, who honestly cares? And I think even liberals know that. And in fact, if liberals really viscerally cared, then they would have made it a moral issue. Like, for example, Donald, why did you have an affair on your wife while she was pregnant? And that is what actually happened to Bill Clinton, by the way, in 1998, I think, where the Republicans were making a moral issue of, why are you lying about having an affair on the first lady? That was a moral issue people actually cared back then. Now the morality has decayed to a point to where in the in the 90s or in the 80s, where landslides were theoretically possible, now we're seeing a society that doesn't even care if Donald Trump had an affair. They care if he had some sort of like booking issue, which is just ridiculous. But anyway, when we look at the polls, like I said, it shows that the landslide is more likely to happen than not. And by landslide, my criterion is not so much that Donald Trump gets all the 50 states, because I think that's a ridiculous thing. And honestly, what sort of democracy would we have if he were to win every single state? I mean, that's just cockamamie. And if it were any other guy winning 50 states, you'd be like, what the hell is happening? Anyway, the point being, though, is that when you have a full sweep of the important parts, I think that's what constitutes or really embodies a landslide in the modern day. Like I said, polarization makes it so that no matter who the candidate is, it's virtually impossible to lose all 50 states. Now, case in point, the 2008 election, you had a Barack Obama who again, I'm not a player hater. So yes, he was a very charismatic guy for the majority of Americans, a good speaker, despite me saying he says, he talks like that. But anyway, people tend to like that. He had this sort of charisma. And I think he really was palatable to many of Americans, and in fact supplanted Hillary in 2008 in the primary for the Democratic nomination for president, 8 years before Trump did the same at the presidential level, which is to say, of course, that the guy had some political acumen that is really underestimated nowadays. Now, granted, John McCain also kind of, he's old, not very charismatic, but he did have a great record insofar he's a maverick, whatever that means. And also, John McCain had a historied record in the Senate. Beyond that, again, veteran, the Hanoi Hilton. His hotel reviews are probably not the best. That being said, do not check his Yelp or his Google reviews page. Now, moving on, when you look at the actual result, though, you'll notice that, again, Barack Obama in 2008, at the very end, and again, after the summer of '08, you had a financial crisis, which was unprecedented. We hadn't seen one this bad since about the 1930s or 40s, which is to say, of course, it was a big issue, folks. And so for this to be happening, we have to consider the fact that, again, the economy is the biggest issue. And Obama was running on that. And guess what? Obviously, he was pointed to win. That being said, despite having the charisma advantage, the incumbency advantage, insofar as obviously it's hard to get 3 terms of the same party, Bush had been reelected, so that's why I say that. So with that being said, you can see that Barack Obama had everything going for him, and he still only won the popular vote by 7.2%. Okay, so again, that's a big win nowadays. But I'm just saying, even as early as 15 years ago, things were massively different in regards to the demography of the country and the polarization therein. Now, think about how civil politics were in 2008 compared to now. And you honestly are going to tell me that Trump or Biden has any case of winning by more than what Obama did in 2008? It's just a ridiculous thing for me to even assume. And so when I say landslide, I'm saying winning the election by the margins you need to win, but confidently. Again, it's like with football, to be honest, where you say, for instance, in this case, for the most part, it's not about winning every single match, every single state. We're talking about, let's say, winning 12 out of 17 games and then winning 3 games in the playoffs and then winning the Super Bowl. Again, you lost 5 games, but that's still a landslide result insofar as you won the bowl, and that's all that you really ought to care about. And so when it comes to this race, again, it's not 538 for Donald Trump. It's more so like 325 for Donald Trump. It's more so winning all the swing states for Donald Trump. That's all you need. And when you win all the swing states, odds are you're going to win the popular vote. Okay, that's just very clear. Now, moving on to my other projections, we do have some things to talk about here for a couple of different reasons. First and foremost, the polling has been very pro-Democrat again for the last 8 years. There were some blips again in the midterm elections when it comes to the Republicans down ballot, but that's a different phenomena overall. Okay. We know that Donald Trump overall does not appease the establishment. So when it comes to them funding their own polls, odds are they're going to be biased against him. And so while we see Trump up by this amount in these states, do you guys really honestly think that Trump is only going to win Wisconsin by 0.1? I really doubt that. Maybe a win by 3 would be more in line. And again, what are the margin of errors for these polls? But again, a couple percentage points, and guess where they skew, but left. Okay. Now moving on. So let's consult the 2016 margin so I can prove myself correct here. So as you can see here, we have the results of the 2016 election. Now, I'm seeing this becoming the reality in 2024, but we're going to add the state of Nevada and some tangential outside chances of him flipping a state like New Hampshire in that order, Minnesota, then New Mexico, then I guess Virginia, then Colorado, then Virginia. Okay, so I mean, you get the idea. Now, granted, there are some things to consult here. When we look at the 538 aggregate pollster, we know that right now they have Donald Trump winning, but in 2020 they had Trump losing. And, that might co-align with reality, but it really isn't corollary. In fact, when you look at the margins, they were really off. Okay. And they got away with it because Biden won. But if you just look into how off they were, it just presents an idea of like what the hell is going on. Okay. So, I mean, it's like to say like, oh, you predicted the Super Bowl right, but your margin was like 30 points off. It's like, dude, okay, maybe you do suck at predicting this, even though you got the result right technically. So as you can see here, 538 was so wrong in 2020. They had Trump winning Texas by a single point. So they were off by about 6 percentage points, which is a huge miss for any state, to be honest. In Ohio, they had Trump winning by less than a percentage points, which is odd because, again, Trump won it by about 10. Okay? They had Iowa going for Trump by 1 point. So you see how slanted these results are. And we keep moving. You go to Pennsylvania, they had Biden winning by 5. They were off by 4. You go to Arizona, they had him winning by 2.3 or 2.6. That's off by over 2. Nevada, again, they were off by like 4. Florida, they were off by 6. Georgia, they were off by 1. North Carolina, they were off by 3. Michigan, they were off by like 5. Wisconsin, they were off by 7 or 8. Okay, so you can see how slanted these polls are. And it's not to say, of course, that they're going to be wrong again, but it's to say that, you have 3 sample sizes, okay? You have the sample of 2016 where they overdid the Democrats, 2020 where they oversampled the Democrats. You have 24 where Trump is leading, but they could still very well be oversampling the Democrats. That's my opinion. And so 2 out of 3 ain't bad, as my dad would say, which is to say, it's more likely than not that the polls we're looking at today are actually disfavorable to Donald Trump on the aggregate, which is unfortunate. Now, moving on, we do have some other things to cover. Now, when it comes to the vice presidential candidate, for those of y'all that have seen Donald Trump's interviews as of recently, like the one with Dr. Phil, that mine got shadow banned, that video. But anyway, that Dr. Phil interview, Trump says that he wouldn't nominate a vice presidential candidate until the convention, which is a little late, to be honest, but it is appropriate. That being said, why does this factor into my video today? Well, to be clear, Joe Biden picked Harris out of a sense of desperation, where he said, I need some color on the ballot. I need somebody on the ballot that will accentuate my old Mayo ass. And you know what? Okay, fair enough. But Harris is less popular than Biden, but he can't get rid of her. It'd be awkward. That being said, Donald Trump has a list of people, and you could say it's a deep bench or not. It's really a quality issue. That being said, the vice presidential candidate for Donald Trump does not seem to be a deal breaker for virtually anybody. And if you talk to anybody in real life, when you start touching the grass, or in my case, maybe a cactus, because there's not much here grass-wise. That being said, we do have a cacophony of people that will not even mention a VP in the name in the lieu of Trump. And within the first 5 or 10 topics that you discuss about politically, okay? People just don't really care who Trump picks for vice president for a couple of different reasons, okay? The polarization in this country has made it so that while Donald Trump is leading in most polls, most of those people don't even give a crap as to who he's going to pick for vice president. Again, reasons being, Donald Trump is already an alpha insofar as politics. He doesn't need somebody to add to his appeal or anything. He already has a solidified evangelical base, however oxymoronic that might be in lieu of Stormy Daniels, Casey McDougal, these types. The point being, though, is that he does have these people solidified, so he doesn't need a Mike Pence to come in and wrangle the anti-gay vote or something. But we do need somebody who's not going to rock the boat. Donald Trump needs somebody who's not going to rock the boat, folks. So what does that mean, not rock the boat? It means you're in the lead, because obviously if you're losing, you need a dynamo, okay? When John McCain chose Sarah Palin, it was a desperation act to reanimate the base, and it somewhat worked. Again, it raised the floor of his electoral prospects, capped the ceiling, or you could say the vice versa, but it did something at least. Whereas with the vice presidential candidate, I think Donald Trump is thinking about his VP being more in the light of Tim Kaine. When Hillary chose Tim Kaine, of course, it was with the idea of, I'm already winning. I'm just going to pick a 60-year-old white guy from the Senate or whatever. Who cares, And that was fine, okay? Because in her idea, she was winning. And, actually referring back to the 2016 margins, we'll see why she thought so. Anyway, to show you the 2016 election, let's first show you the 2020. As you can see, Trump was never really leading in the first place. So that kind of just shows you the angle here. So yeah, if I remember my talking point, because I got interrupted, 2016 came out in this result. And what's interesting about this, of course, is that Tim Kaine could be, honestly, you could just assume that he didn't really make a difference in any of these states, and that Hillary could have picked somebody else given how close it was. Now, this Trump campaign is probably not going to be that close. And so Trump is really at free leisure to pick whoever he wants to juror and see who his favorite is. I think the list is down to 8 people as theoreticals, and about a couple, maybe 3 to 4 that are actual solidified as having a chance for vice president. That being said, of course, I think I really summarized my point here, that I think a Donald Trump victory looks more so like this. So as you guys can see right here, this is more or less what I see as a landslide. Again, it's not about winning California. It's not about winning Oregon. It's about winning the states that you need to, and convincingly, okay? You do not need the Patriots 2007 season, and look how that ended up anyway. They lost the Super Bowl to Eli Manning, God forbid. Now, the idea, though, is that you just need to clutch up, okay? You don't need a perfect GPA. Just make sure everything else is in line and have a high enough one, and we can get away with a lot. And so, to be honest, Donald Trump, again, the VP pick, being so low in priority, gives you a credence as to like what's going on here, that the election is actually not that close, and that Trump is complete leisure to pick whoever he wants. And what also is interesting about this, folks, is that you ought to really like the video, smash the like button, because again, this is the sort of commentary that I think you guys really want, because this is nuanced. You won't really see this anywhere else, and I think it's very cute. But let's be clear here. When it comes to the final election results, it seems pretty obvious to me that the conviction will help Donald Trump. And if anything, he's at a low point of support because it's been kind of wishy-washy as to where the support is lying given the post-felonious conviction. That being said, any sort of sentence that would be seen as egregious by the public would only help Donald Trump. So keep that in mind. So things are subject to change. In 2 weeks, I'll have a completely different tune, probably a better one and more optimistic. And I'm already off of the copium. Okay, I'm about to overdose. So let me get some proverbial Narcan, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Adios.